making all sorts of power. This one's also equipped with the Turbo 400 and a dual gate shifter. The shifter is kind of a cool item, obviously coming out of Hurst, where it made it almost idiot-proof to shift it into neutral or reverse by mistake. As far as internals for the motor, well, 10.5 to 1 compression, a great set of flowing heads, a great flowing exhaust, and a Rochester quadrijet is what completed the entire package. Now, as far as rear-end gear ratios, 342 was a standard gear ratio, 391 was optional. This one has the 342. Now, all the cars that we're running today, we made sure they all had posi, so they all had the same bite off the line.
Where does Oldsmobile fit into the lexicon? Boy, I tell you what, I think it was the most car you could buy at the time for the money. When you really balance out, I want to go fast, but I want to do it with style and comfort.
Somewhere in the late 60s, George Hurst and Linda Vaughn and Oldsmobile hooked up and started building some very special 442s. Actually, they're not even 442s, they're Hurst Olds. And, you know, really those cars kind of took on the image of George Hurst. George Hurst was a character. Part of his image or persona, I guess you could say, is having Linda Vaughn around him all the time, and she's certainly an icon of the muscle car era.
Olds really hit it hard with the visual stuff. They had the great twin snorkel hoods, they had the super stripe kit.
Now GM had of course, the 400 cubic inch limit and intermediates. George Hurst had a good idea. He said, that's GM's rule, that's not my rule. I'm going to put the big car 455 in the intermediate A body, and that ought to give it plenty of performance.
I think the first run was the best of the bunch. The second and third run, it just seemed to fall flat on its face, and I probably should have given it a little more RPM, like did a little longer brake stand. I didn't. The tires hooked up really well, and it just went bah. So first run's the best one of the bunch. Pleasantly surprised with this car. First two times I lit the tires up a little bit too much. The last time it hooked up just nice. Easy car to power shift. And all those guys that say Boss 9s don't work, first run, again, it bogged a little bit. The second run, I gave it way too much throttle. I spun the tires. The third run was pretty good. It's all about getting used to the tires. I'm certain if I had 2 or 3 more runs, we could run a little quicker, but the rules are 3 runs. That's what we gave it, and that's the time.
Well, there you have it. 4 cars down into the 13s, making a fairly respectable run. Unfortunately, the Challenger, not so much.
Ready for burnout?
We'll do a whole lot of them when we come back. So now we find ourselves in a tie between the LS6 and the Boss 9. Now, the test that Peter absolutely insisted on is the one that there's no real quantitative way to measure. But every single muscle car enthusiast knows what we're talking about when we talk about a earth-shattering, earth-moving, smoky, big, rotten burnout. Now, you do know how to do a burnout, don't you?
Do you know how to eat?
Oh, now that's harsh.
Again, the automatic's at a little bit of a disadvantage, trying to get the tires to spin really hard. We can't get it spinning hard enough with the brake stand to start with. If we loosened off the rear shoes, I'm certain we'd do a way better burnout, but we said we're going to test them the way we drive them in all the tests. You know, I was a little disappointed with the quarter-mile time on this car. The 331 gears, well, it helps in the burnout. This thing does a great burnout. Once you get them spinning again, it just wants to keep spinning and spinning and spinning. And these Firestones, they go up in smoke quite nicely. The Hemi was really introduced in 1964, the 426, in order to go, of all things, NASCAR racing. What seemed like a lightweight car, in reality wasn't. These cars are 3,800 pounds, and with a torsion bar front suspension, let's face it, you're just not going to handle. Well, as far as the motors went, well, that was the heart of any muscle car. Here we had a crossbolt block, steel crank and rods, aluminum heads, and of course, the hemispherical combustion chamber, and ports that flowed very nicely. An aluminum intake, 2 Carters on top. It was an aggressive package, 490 foot-pounds of torque, 425 horsepower. Now behind that, they had to make sure the trannies were tough. You could either get a torque flight, 727, or you could get a stick with the Hurst pistol grip like this car here. Out back, you could get an 8 3/4, or you could get the 9 3/4 Dana 60 rear end. Standard ring and pinion was a 323, and you could go all the way up to a 410 if you so desired, and obviously a posi was almost a must in a Hemi car.
What can you say about the term Hemi? I mean, it's just magic.
It still survives today. It's one of those iconic words that came from the muscle car era that people who don't even really know muscle cars seem to know in their back of their head means performance.
There's just no getting around the fact, you know, that the term Hemi has so much weight behind it. You know, that it again, is probably the best-known name in muscle car history.
The Dodge Hemi design got tapped by people who want to accelerate the fastest as the way to go, and was carried forward, and nobody's ever, you know, gotten to the point where you're looking for an extra 5 miles per hour or an extra tenth and said, you know, if we back up and try this other direction, I think that's where our limit is. So it's almost as if the Hemi has proved out as being the way to make horsepower.
Again, if you want to take one particular engine that just, you know, is the icon of the muscle car era, it's got to be the Hemi.
Well, we said we were going to do a real-life test. The clutch is almost out of this car. I knew I had to dump the clutch high enough to get them spinning, but I didn't want to take the clutch right out of it. Did a really good burnout, but unfortunately, with all the other things going on with this car, I feel sorry this car hasn't been done justice for the simple fact the clutch is slipping so bad. Gotta admit, I'm a little disappointed in this burnout. I'm trying to launch it in second gear so I don't have to shift right away and lose all that momentum, but the thing doesn't have quite enough torque like the other cars. These red lightings don't light up as nice as the Goodyears either. No doubt this car did the best burnout. Launch it at about 5,000 in second gear, and it just doesn't stop spinning. I can just kind of feather it at 5 to 5,500 and just keep smoking. Great burnout car. Like the Firestones light up a little earlier, a little quicker than the Goodyears. No problem roasting the tires, and like all the sticks, we're doing the burnout out of second gear.
Coming up on the Muscle Car Shootout, we will tally up all the scores. 35 years ago, this collection of cars were arguably the fastest cars on the planet. Are they still the fastest? No, and not by a long shot, yet the legend of the American muscle car is stronger now than ever. And why is that? Because those of us who were around at the birth of this era of muscle witnessed something that will never